Fans, welcome. This is another episode of Cali's Finest. How do you find Cali's Finest? You find it on the 10th of every single month. New episodes dropping right here on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Be sure to like, comment, share this video, and please subscribe. The more subscribers we get, the more great content we can bring to you. All right, we're going way back down memory lane. This guy was known in the region of California as Crayz. His name is Rob. And does this guy go back? You better believe it. This guy trained the late great Supreme. He trained Kid Chaos. He was there way back in the day. We talk about his career when wrestling was changing in the 90s, and also when XPW came around, and his involvement and how it never transpired for him to be in Extreme Pro Wrestling. All that and a whole hell of a lot more. We get into the psychology, what pro wrestling is in the mind of this guy known as Craig. His name is Rob, and he is my guest. He's your guest on this episode of Cali's Finest.
Well, this is going to be a without question. This is going to be fascinating. This is going to be a trip down memory lane. This is going to be, and we're going to go down. We're going to go down all the memory lanes that are in every neighborhood.
That's very true.
With the neighborhoods, we'll get into what that means for the fans that know. But Crayz, Rob, can I call you Rob?
You can call me Rob. No one calls me Crayz anymore.
All right. Well, the fans that know you as Crayz, man, welcome to Cali's Finest. You definitely are one of Cali's finest because you've done a lot. You've done a ton in this industry for a long period of time, and you actually have involvement with a lot of prominent names that have come in and out throughout the years, and we'll get into all that. You'll get into all that. But once again, fans, thanks for joining us. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Well, let me say that again. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up, hit the bell, the notification if you like this new episodes on the 10th of every month, Cali's Finest on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Let's get right into it, Crayz. Okay, where are you from originally?
I'm from the Valley, pretty much, Burbank, but I grew up in the San Fernando Valley.
Okay. And when did you, what age were you when you found out that, not that you just liked wrestling, but that you kind of like were so intrigued with it that you wanted to be a part of it? When did that come into your mind?
Well, I'm a bit older than everyone, so I actually started in middle of '84, so just after Hogan won the title.
So that's when you, as a youngster, were like, "Whoa, hey, this is cool. I want to be a part of this."
Probably not wanted to be a part of it, but definitely intrigued by the whole idea. I mean, just like you, probably Superstars Wrestling Challenge on every Saturday morning. It was like a staple. And then me and my best friend just happened to kind of roll into it at the same time together. And, you watch it on Saturdays, and then you'd go to the market and Pro Wrestling Illustrated would be there with other people that we had no idea about because we didn't know about the NWA at the time or any of the, scattered promotions all over the country. So, like everybody, you started watching Hogan, and then of course Piper, and that was they were building WrestleMania 1. That was during that time period. So it was an incredible time for wrestling.
So you kind of got attached to it just prior to the time when everybody was attached to it. You were just a little before it.
Just a tad bit before. So I think when we started getting into it, Valentine was still Intercontinental Champ right before he lost it to Tito.
Yeah.
So it was like right in that time period. I remember them doing the cage match on, they showed the highlights on television, and Valentine breaking that old shitty title for what ended up being the Intercontinental title forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was right before the huge push.
Yeah. Okay. So mid 80s for sure, early mid 80s. And so Can you what like where were you? What grade were you in around that time? Or like was that junior high? Or?
Let's see. I was still in. I think I was just starting junior high school.
Okay.
So yeah, about junior high school, 7th grade probably is when it all kind of started. And again, me and my best friend who lived not too long down the street we kind of grew up on wrestling together. So it's, and then of course, those time periods, like everyone didn't have cable. So my friend ended up getting cable TV, and then we learned about the NWA. So then it was like this, you'd watch wrestling Saturday mornings and then you'd watch wrestling Saturday afternoons. So we were double dipping. We were getting that morning show, and then at 3:30 p.m. we'd be right there for the NWA. And then you started learning about these different, I guess, styles, even though we didn't understand how work was done.
Right.
They were definitely different TV shows. So it was kind of a cool thing to also get into that early in the, cable television.
And I guess it depends where you were in SoCal. Like I had family over on the west side in Santa Monica, and I don't know if it was a different cable company or if it was a different service. Like I know there was On TV and Select TV and all that. And there's a big switch on the back of the TV. But anyway, I don't know if that was it, but I remember over on the west side, like my dad, for example, somehow we were able to watch World Class. And so he had cable, and it was early advent of cable, like, and he got it early. Whereas my mom's house, we didn't have that. So go over to his, and my grandparents had cable, but they didn't. But we would see World Class on occasion. So I remember getting the introduction to that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and then I look back on that, like, I don't know how we ended up watching that, but it was on. So yeah, when that was just a boom, and whoa, what is all this other stuff,
I believe that was early ESPN when they were like begging for things to be on. So they were taking shows that were like, no one knew of, and they were like, cool, stick it in this time slot, because they didn't have a lot of sports on there yet. It was still a young channel as well. So I remember that as well. I remember seeing, the Von Erichs and the Freebirds, Cactus Jack, well before he was anything on there. So yeah.
I just remember my dad, my sister, and I one night were watching it, and the Boogie Woogie Man was like going into the audience. Their chairs were getting thrown, and it was like, what are we watching here? Amazing. Like, like we're not going to see this on WWF,
For sure. One of the best angles I ever saw, I don't know if you know him, but it was Iceman King Parsons, and he was wrestling, who was he wrestling? The Savannah Jack. And you could tell it was the 80s, because Savannah Jack was a black baby face, and Iceman Parsons was actually a black guy as well.
Yep.
They ran an angle where Iceman Parsons went to the ring and was throwing Oreo cookies at him.
Oh shit!
As an angle. I mean, it just goes to show you where wrestling was in the 80s, where two black wrestlers were actually using that as an angle, and it got major heat, and it put Savannah Jack over as this major baby face.
That's funny about wrestling. Like when you look back at that stuff, I mean, at the time especially, it was like, okay, this is outrageous. This is wrong, maybe in so many ways, but nobody wanted to criticize it, because if I criticize this, then that makes me look like this foolish person that's taking pro wrestling seriously. Mm-hmm. So wrestling just got away with so much. It's like kind of like the lucha world. Like they still to this day, look, when a black wrestler comes down, you hear chocolate in the crowd, and it's just like, it's lucha. All right,
I remember I mean, again, like wrestling was a different product, obviously, at the time. I remember seeing promos for WrestleMania where Piper, Orndorff, and Bob Orton were cutting promos for local things, and were calling Mr. T a spear chucker.
Yep.
On local television, not on the big cable shows. We're talking Channel 11. So a different time, obviously, but I think they also drew heat a totally different way.
Yeah, I mean that's look at the it's hard to look, because now I won't stay on this too long, but we're in a time right now where it's controversial to
do anything.
To even have a role in a movie right now to an extent.
Uh-huh.
That when you're an actor, so it's very hard to justify right now in this time period why wrestlers did that. But look, at the time, I mean, there were slasher movies, horror movies that were really outrageous, especially in the 70s and 80s, that were just like deplorable. Some of the stuff, but again, people were in a mindset, well, this is obviously a movie, it's not real, you know. So that's how wrestling was looked at. And I think, again, if you had a network back then that had a promo in a wrestling show, nobody again would take it seriously, because it's like, well, what do you mean, you guys, this is a pro wrestling show, like it's not real, like put it on the air, it's fine, you know, like type of thing. These are bad guys, these are the bad guys that are talking
stuff.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I don't know, were you at that show? I had Sabu on Extreme Memories, and we talk. By the way, Extreme Memories, new episodes on the 15th and 30th of every month, right here in the Wrestling Chatter of everything XPW. But we were talking about the match, I think somewhere out here, where it was him and Al Snow in some high school gym.
Yeah. I was at that Snow.
Yeah,
that was the one where I actually met Joey.
Okay.
And me, Lester, and Byron, and someone else met at that show, and that's where I initially met Joey. If you find that footage, Sabu throws a ladder over him. I'm the one who actually helps take the ladder off of Al Snow because he's stuck in it with one arm. It's me that takes it off. and I literally, I walked up to him knowing it was a work because I had new guys on the show, and like I'm like lifting the ladder off of him, going, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he's like, yeah. I just, and then he went back to work.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know the story. Then the cops got called, and, you know, it was featured on one of those Discovery, whatever channel.
Oh, they thought the people who own that building thought Terry Funk was going ballistic. Like, legitimately did.
So that Sabu and Funk then, or Sabu?
It was Sabu and Al Snow, and with a Funk run in at the end.
Okay.
And I don't think they told the promoter.
Right. Right. Because I remember working with Terry Funk at the sports arena for XPW. And it was like, once he got in that zone, I mean, he came up and attacked myself and Rivera. He clobbered me, took care of me. But
you're lucky he didn't me.
Oh, really? I think I got like I remember like I fell into it.
Yeah. So I mean, I shouldn't say that. He took care of me, but his punches are definitely a tad snug.
Yeah, he forearmed me on the back. But I remember falling away as he did it, just in case. So, but I remember, or no, it was on the head, but I just kind of whipped my head. But anyway, I remember, dude, when he got into that mode, none of us, we were all like marks again. We were like, dude, what? He's pissed. Yeah, I think he's really pissed, you know, and all that. But the story, going back to that event with Al Snow, Funk, and when you were there, and when you first met Supreme and Chaos and all them, and Christian Blood, Byron, the cops got called. The story was the cops got called. They came and they saw the ruckus, the mayhem. They witnessed it. Then they look at the ring and they're like, "Oh, it's pro wrestling. Yeah, it's fine." And they left because that it goes back to that whole thing of talking about, even in WrestleMania 2, when you watch the promo with what was it, Joe Frazier and Mr. T and Lou Duva and Ace and Piper, and he's like, "I'll never shave my head like an Indian and paint myself black," and that's what he said on the promo at WrestleMania 2. Now, just like those cops going to that gym and like, oh, all the blood, all these chairs getting thrown around, all this destruction. Yeah, this is pro wrestling. I'm not going to look foolish and take this seriously and go back to the station and, you know, so it's the same principle. It's like nobody would ever hold wrestling accountable, because who am I to hold wrestling accountable? That makes me look like this person that probably thinks wrestling is real. Nobody wanted to.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
We all have a story like that. I have a story with a fan and jumping in the ring in Simi Valley. I end up hitting him, kind of beating his ass. Logan, who is Paul and was security then, drags him outside. Well, the door to get in and the door to the locker room are like this. As soon as he got out, Gary Key in red beat this guy's ass.
I heard that.
I mean,
Yeah.
and good. They called the cops. I was working one of the trailer trash. He pins me. I roll out, grab my bag, didn't even get dressed, ran out, threw my shit in my car, and drove off. I was like, I'm not going to be here when the cops get here. And they did the exact same thing. Rolled up, saw wrestling, bailed.
Yeah.
It's just a crazy thing. But there's a million stories, I'm sure, like that. But there's also a million stories where the cops actually rolled places and tried to find people too. So
yeah, but again, it's that stigma with wrestling. It's like wrestling had this kind of get out of jail free card for the longest time, and I think the only reason why now it doesn't so much is because look, if they're going to attack actors in a movie or in a TV show, well then now wrestling is in that same category. But
Sure.
I don't think wrestling would have been taken seriously had society not reached this point where we're even taking acting and maybe even music to an extent now.
Yeah, I think maybe not the hardcore fans, because like obviously the 80s, they kind of had a weird thing. I mean, Piper had been stabbed and shot at and all kinds of crazy shit. So I think that there's definitely people who believed it then, but you're right. The mainstream during the 80s and early 90s thought it was just nonsense. Even though WrestleManias were making huge amounts of money and having tons of fans, they still kind of shit on it.
Yeah. It's always, wrestling has been always weird that way. And another aspect of wrestling that I always felt strange is like I've been in the locker room in minor league basketball when I was doing announcing for them, and I became friends with one of the members of the Scorpions. So I hung out like kind of in the back of a major rock concert and all that. And throughout the time I've done acting and all that. And wrestling is the only entity where it's like in the music and sports and plays, it's like, oh, talk to these people that just saw you perform. This is wonderful, these fans. Or in wrestling, it's like, these marks are coming by. But like it's the only industry that's like kind of like shits on the fans.
Yeah, at least keeps them at a much longer distance.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I was I think about 10 years into my career, I was at the Northridge Mall, and here I am with a baby, because I had just had my baby was probably 6 months old. Maybe me and my wife are walking through the mall. Some guy comes up to me literally and is like, "Are you Crayz?" And here in my head, I'm going, did I spit on you? What did I do before I tell you who I am? So I'm like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we saw you this show, blah, blah, blah. And then, I'm like, and here I am, grab my kid and walk away. And my ex-wife was just like, that's the craziest thing. I go, yeah, I know. Because you never know. Who knows what I've done to you? I've said a lot of horrible things and spit on people and all kinds of shit. So who knows?
Think about all the times too that I've had those here and there. I've had those instances too, like going to a theme park or to a mall or whatever, and someone will recognize you. But think of all the times that someone saw you and never said anything to you.
Exactly.
Probably more than they said something to you. Yeah. But anyway, okay, so this is all very interesting. I'm really looking forward to getting into all this with you, man. By the way, you and we kind of bumped into each other out in Ventura a few years ago at some small show at a rock concert. I was with my buddy Dave, who works at KLOS. Shout out to Dave Kaplan. He's actually Engineer Dave on Breakfast with the Beatles on KLOS.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, we were there, all three of us. We were right there at the burger place, The Habit, eating, and then we walked over.
That's right.
You and him really kind of, you guys were the same age, and you and I with wrestling was the equivalent of you and him could talk music.
With music, yeah, probably. Yeah.
So, but anyway, I can't remember what show that was we went to, but it was some heavy show, like
maybe Warped Tour.
Maybe I've seen them before, but I'm not sure if that was the time.
Me either. It was either the Ventura Fair or it had to be Warped Tour, because it was that bar like on the same side. Oh, yeah. Now I remember.
Oh wait, yeah.
Was it? Yeah. Was it Cirque Noir?
No. What was the? It's gonna come back to me. They're old school.
Oh, something Wolf.
British old school.
Yeah. I know exactly who you're talking about. A friend of mine knows that band really well.
Okay.
I was at that same show. Exactly. I know who you're talking about. I'd have to.
Man, it'll probably come back by the end of it.
Yeah, that little bar right there on off of California, I think.
Yeah, you go through the bar around the backbone, and there's a little concert room.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay, so let's go back to when you said you got into pro wrestling. What was the time, Rob, that you knew, like, okay, I'm a fan, but now I get this and I want to be a part? Like, when did you get the bug to like want to be in the business?
So, like any other young child who likes wrestling, me and my best friend would literally work matches in his living room. And I mean, like, do them as a work, as in we would go over, get a finish. You know, we knew how to hopefully not kill each other, you know, body slamming each other. We would get a mattress, blah, blah, blah. Not quite like backyard, but more just like, you know, characters and kind of, so I kind of understood it was a work, or we knew it wasn't real. Yeah. I happened to be at a UWF show in Reseda at the country club long before XPW worked there.
Right.
And I met Rick Sadis.
Brian
through another guy named what was his name? It was one of a friend of ours was a tape trader.
Okay.
So this is a kind of a really long story, but I met Rick Sadis there. So me and another friend of mine, Sean, would go to these shows and watch the show and raise hell. And I met Rick in line, and we were just talking, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to like get in a ring one day." And Sadis was like, "Dude, you gotta go to this place. It's in Sun Valley. It's called Slammers. You can rent the ring." So me and my buddy were like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Awesome! Like, how do we do this?" So we ended up meeting Rick there and renting the ring for an hour or whatever, you know, just to say I did it. I was like, "Oh." Yeah. So we went out there, and you know, me and my buddy were bumping on nothing, you know. So we were like, you know, this thing's gonna at least help us out. Rick kind of showed us the ropes because he was already starting to train with some guys in San Bernardino. So he kind of showed us how to hit the ropes so we wouldn't kill each other. Sort of showed us how to bump, blah, blah, blah. Did an hour, videotaped it so we had it forever, and I have it somewhere on VHS still.
Wow.
From there, we went to another UWF show that, of course, Sadis came to. And then Sadis was like, "Dude, I'm training out in San Bernardino with these guys who were kind of an offshoot of Bill and Jesse. They went to school there, and then, like any good wrestler, decides he wants to do his own show and went the other direction." So it was a guy named the Thrash Master, JT Houston, and then a guy named Larry Ludden, who was from Florida, and a guy named Scott Cole, who I think was from the Midwest, but he had wrestled in Japan a couple of times. And then we went out there, and Sergio, which is friends with Favi, and a guy named the Postal Assassin, Frankie D.
Yeah.
We're all out there training. So, of course, I was like, "Hey, I want to learn how to do this shit." And they trained me for free. So I would drive out to San Bernardino and learn how to bump. And they stretched me out pretty good in the beginning, making sure that I could get my ass beat, and that they never really said it was a work, but they didn't say that it wasn't. Like they kind of, it was like a blurred lines where, because I kind of said I knew. I was like, "Nah, you know, look." So about 3 weeks in, they kind of let go and stopped killing me, and then showed me like the real ropes of, you know, how to throw punches, and kind of got me into the this is how you work. Like, don't kill people and learn stuff. And, you know, the whole point of pro wrestling, at least for me, was if you know, learn how to work, don't hurt people. Because this one guy, Larry, was like, "Look, I have to work the following weekend and the following weekend and the following weekend. If you go out and punch me in the face or hurt me, I'm losing money. So learn how to work."
Right.
And that's pretty much how I learned from these guys. And it just kind of rolled and rolled and rolled. And then I think about 2 or 3 months later, they were like, "Okay, you should be able to at least have one match, you know, work a match." So I worked the opener. My very first match was against Jason Redondo, who thankfully was really good to me, took care of me. The only thing I will say, like, we did a slap spot, and he slapped the shit out of me, like good. Where I was like, oh shit. So did that, and then worked a couple of more little spot matches under a different name, just kind of working. Then through other people, I ended up finding a ring in North Hollywood that was owned by somebody that was in this garage, and literally the ring fit in the garage.
Oh, wow.
Like there was barely enough room on both sides to stand on the apron.
Right.
So I ended up going there, and me and a couple of my friends would go there and we'd train. And my friend, another friend, Scott, knew other people, and they were like, oh, this kid really wants to learn how to wrestle. So I was like, whatever, just have him come down. That was Byron.
Okay.
So that's how I met Byron.
Christian Blood and XPW, Tech
Blood, Tech 9, Byron Walker, all the different names that he worked under. So he started working with me or training there. So I showed him how to bump, got him started literally from scratch, showed him everything that I had learned. From there, the guy who Sadis was at the UWF show with, his name was Casey Boyer. Yeah. He knew somebody named Lester that wanted to learn how to wrestle. So from there, Lester started coming to North Hollywood. And
Supreme, by the way,
Supreme, folks. Yeah, Lester. And he started coming there, and I showed him everything, how to bump. I have all that stuff on tape. Him and Joey's first bumps, how to do it, how to run the ropes, everything. Joey ended up coming to North Hollywood as well through the Al Snow show. We had to convince him because at that time I think Joey was 16.
What year are we talking right now?
90, late 94.
Okay.
Late 94, I think. I'm pretty sure. I'd have to look at pictures because we have dates on them, but I'll say late 94.
Okay.
So that's how Joey, we had to convince him. Me and Lester and Byron were like, dude, you should do this, because he was a football player in high school still. He was 16 years old.
Yeah, he's young.
And of course, Lester, his idol, was like, dude, come down. And that I trained them all, or I broke them all in, showed them all how to bump, how to run the ropes, how to do, most holds. And we would start going and working matches at this little gym or this little garage, but still going to San Bernardino to see the shows out there. And then I would work if I could get work on them. They took a little break. And at that time, me and Byron had discovered ECW, because where I worked at the time had satellite that showed the shows out of Philadelphia, and I would tape them at work and take them home.
Oh, wow.
So that's where the hoodie gimmick kind of came from, because obviously no one on the West Coast even knew who the Public Enemy was yet.
Right. So you guys were the neighborhoods.
We were the neighborhoods, which was kind of a mix, because I also got tapes from Smoky Mountain of the Gangstas. So me and Byron were like, I go, this would be the greatest gimmick. We'll be two white guys who actually think we're black gangsters.
Yes.
Like
a lot of kids in America at the time.
But more like we actually, the gimmick in our head was like, we thought we were black.
Oh, okay.
We weren't like wiggers. We were like people, and we would cut these weird, wild promos out in San Bernardino. So from there, the hoodies were born. And the first show that the neighborhoods were going to come on, Lester and Joey came to the show. And I was talking to the guys because I had knew them well. And I go, hey, these guys have been training. They're ready for a match. I want to say that they had sent them a tape already beforehand, and they had seen them working this thing. The first night we went there, Lester and Joey, Supreme and Chaos, worked a match. Their first night that we took them out there. And it was if you've ever seen it, Joey probably has it. It was a big ring. And I mean big. It was 22 by 22.
Wow.
And they just, they were used to working in this little ring. It was like 16 by 16.
Right.
And they blew up. And it was but it was such a great match. And they did a lot of stuff. And that's how the Supreme Chaos hoodies thing happened, and how we really kind of took from there. I started sending tapes to people, and we just went around the bend. We worked for like 2 years against each other, and I mean everywhere, and beat the living snot out of each other. I mean, a lot. I have stories. We worked at Moguls. It was for Incredibly Strange. I worked an opening match with a friend of mine because he wanted to do a wrestling match. So during this match, he punches me in the eye and swells my eye closed. I pin him. Byron comes to the ring and Supreme Chaos come to the ring, and we're going to do a tag match. From there, we get into it. Joey hits me underneath the other eye and gives me a mouse. So now I have one eye I can't see out of, and the other one's swelling up. And if you've ever, you've been around Lester and Joey a lot, we did some crazy shit. It was a bar, and the people were right up against the ropes or the ring. Like, we were shit canning each other through the ropes and like barely touching the ropes and just bowling people over that had drinks in their hands. I remember Lester was beating my ass on the outside. He's boom, boom, throwing that at me. And there's somebody with a beer. He grabs the beer out of the guy's hand, chugs it back, gives it back to him, picks me up, and starts beating my ass again. So didn't even stop. So there's like great memories like that of those 2 years of us just beating each other's ass. Like, good times. But yeah, it started really simple with just knowing people. And that's how you meet Lester. And I met Byron and met Joey, and it turned into this. I mean, the 2 years were probably the best 2 years of my life. We would travel together to go beat each other's ass in the same car.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And where were all your dates or locations and how long?
I mean, we wrestled in Hollywood, we wrestled in San Bernardino, Colton, Compton, LA. I mean, pretty much Maywood. We worked for Ed Aarons down in Maywood. We worked the street fairs. I mean, great times. One of my favorite matches I probably ever worked with them, and we worked a lot. We worked a tag match for Ed Aarons at the street fair. We were the champs at the time, and Ed Aarons was pretty easy going about just giving you who needed to win.
Okay.
You're going to win, do whatever you want. So, of course, it was a lucha rules because down in Maywood, it's predominantly Hispanic. So Joey and Lester hit the ring first, and I want to say that they said they were from LA or, they were homegrown. And, Joey's Hispanic. Me and Byron hit the ring. I roll out of the ring, and the first thing I do is I grab the mic and go, first of all, this is America, and we don't work lucha rules. I ain't doing this 2 out of 3 falls crap. We're the champs. We say what goes. We get back in the ring. Of course, Lester and Joey beat us in the first fall. I roll back out, grab the mic. Whoa, 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 whoa. This is lucha rules. And you can see they were like corn cobs and shit flying in the air at me and Byron. We end up beating them in the second fall and end up beating them because they wanted us to go over. And I remember telling Lester and Joey, because did you ever go to those street fairs?
Not the ones you're talking about.
There was like 1,500 people around the ring.
Yeah. I know which ones you're referring to, though.
And there was no security to get back. And me and Byron would say the worst things to these people. I would cuss at them in Spanish and say horrible, horrible things. So I told Lester and Joey, you're going to beat our ass on the way back because I'm not getting stabbed or beat up. I'd rather have Lester thump my head than someone else. So we fought to the back, but those were like some of the best memories. And, now that, both Byron and Lester are gone, those are the fondest memories that I have of both of us. Or,
that's awesome.
The first time in San Bernardino where Lester got color and got color good. Wow. It was just, because no one knew how to do it yet. He did it with an X-Acto knife.
Oh my gosh. First of many.
First of many. But there you go. That's the story of basically how I got in and a roundabout way of how Lester, Joey, and Byron got in.
So going back to Rick Sadist, he was, you mentioned a guy by the name of Boyer.
Casey Boyer. Casey Boyer was a tape trader in LA. Like, this guy had some of the best tapes of the time. Like, he had, Vader and Hansen in Japan. I don't know how he got it, but he got tons of New Japan, tons of All Japan. Like Oregon, he had Oregon Wrestling, Smoky Mountain, Memphis. He was tape trader. So he would tape, he'd get these really cool tapes and trade them with people across the United States. And then he would make custom tapes for me and, of course, Lester as well. And Lester was big in like All Japan. He would rent All Japan wrestling tapes from a place in I guess it's Van Nuys, but it's off of like Sherman Oaks and Haskell maybe. But it used to be this little Japanese tape place, and they would get All Japan, and so he would drive from LA to the Valley to get tapes to watch All Japan because he loved Vader.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that now, Rick Sadist, he wrestled in the WWF as a jobber
many times
under the name Brian Boyer. Is that where the Boyer name came from with him?
Yeah. So it was that guy's name was Casey Brian Boyer, and that's why he wrestled under that name. Yeah.
Okay, so he just kind of picked that name.
I think a lot of the boys who wrestled during that time period would use shoot names of our friends or as a rib, like several people wrestled under Dan Farron.
Yeah. Oh, this is a very interesting story, man. I knew of Dan Farron. I think I had been to Slammer. Yeah, I would already been to Slammers, but I never met him in person. And I remember hearing him on Dynamite D's Wrestle Talk cable radio show. And I remember hearing you call up one night randomly, knowing years later it was you, and you were in full Neighborhoods gimmick.
Oh yeah, we did it with him, and we did it with the Shadow as well.
Shadow Man,
who took Dee's place.
So this is a funny story, man. I remember knowing who and seeing pictures of Dan Farron back then. Now, I was at where Rick Sadist was, Brian Boyer, going against Razor Ramon, was a TV taping of Superstars at Long Beach Arena in '93, February, and it aired in March. And I remember I was pretty close. I got kind of snuck down, and I go to the ringside area, and I don't know if it was the Nasty Boys or Money Inc. or whoever, but they were going against two jobbers, and one of them had a mask on. It was a big guy, and his name was Dan Farron. And I yelled up in the ring, like, "You're not Dan Farron." And then this guy randomly next to me goes, "That's right. He's not Dan Farron because I'm Dan Farron." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" and he goes, "Well, yeah, here, go ahead and look." And he gets his ID out, and he said, "Oh, so you Dynamite D?" He goes, "Yep, that's me." I'm like, "Oh, what the hell? Like, what is just the craziest, weirdest coincidence in the world, man?" So that literally happened. I was staying there, listening, and then Dan Farron happened to be right there.
I want to say that was a friend of ours, Augie, that was wrestling. Okay. He wrestled with Bill and Jess. That's how he got those gigs.
Yeah, and then Gary Key, of course, was on that against the Head Shrinkers. He got his nose busted open on that one. But okay, so this was like, you're talking circa when you did these tours into the mid '90s.
Yeah, up until we worked for UIWA.
Yeah,
we worked for Golden State. We worked for MPW, the first MPW.
Right.
Since there were, I don't know, 3 versions of it now. I'm not sure. And again, yeah, and then every other indie you can think of, like I said, we wrestled at the All Nation Center. Anywhere that they would book us, we went. Like we were whores. If we could get work, we were doing it because we wanted to work.
Right. And so like, and during that time, when you going into like the mid '90s, you were in the UIWA doing shows for them, like you said, other shows too, and that was at the time wrestling was booming. And then you talked about Slammers before. Do you remember Dynamite D when he and the head slammer, the guy who ran everything, Vern Langdon, passed away since too? Do you remember when they had a big split and D left because D was like the guy that was running things with Vern basically, and promoting him on the radio show. I mean, the whole gamut, training everybody. But I know that was a big blow to Slammers, and they had a falling out. And that's when him, Patrick Hernandez, and then Kevin Kleinrock formed SCCW. But they were also running at the same time the UIWA was running. That's when I started getting involved. I was hanging out at Slammers and all that stuff. But I don't. Well, I get into it, but
I worked shows for them as well.
Sorry,
I worked for SCCW as well.
Yeah, I was gonna want you to confirm that.
Yeah, I worked the UCLA show.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah, Slamfest. That's right, exactly. And then I want to say that was like the first show you and I were on together, if I remember correctly.
Probably. I know I worked other shows for them, but probably little spot shows here and there. Because like I said, we would work whoever, but it was me and Johnny Hemp worked that show. And I think Byron worked Jack Studd, maybe?
That sounds about right.
I think so.
I think it was. I remember also when I went to go check out UIWA. Now there's some footage, and I know you know.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I was in the crowd with my friend Bob Cadden, who we got to get on the show too. But he and I were doing our thing in the crowd, and I was mouthing off to you. And
you were.
And then you literally held the ropes open and said, "Come on, come on." And I gave the Mr. Wonderful just did one of those. I don't know what I had to do something. I wasn't going to go in the ring with you, but that's on footage. That's on the TV show here in SoCal for a while called The Boiler Room.
Correct.
And it was hosted by Dee and the late Doc Marley.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a local show done, and it was put on television. And
correct. I think Channel 56, right?
I think so, or KGLA or KDOC, one of them.
Yeah, I forgot which one it was. And I think they did like 3 episodes, maybe
something like that. And then shortly after that was when everybody kind of like split off, because that's when all the contracts began to get signed by talent that was going to be in this would-be Extreme Pro Wrestling a year from that, like 98, you know, because we all signed those disclosure contracts 1 year before the first show. And that,
I got offered a deal.
I want to get into that too, because so we're in that era right now. Kaos, Supreme, yourself, Christian Blood, all these guys are showcased, and UIWA at that time was the show that was on TV. SECW was around and all that, but UIWA had a TV show, albeit local. It's still a big deal back then. We talked all about how, like, just today with YouTube and all that, these shows like what we're doing now are great, but man, like being on television back then when you didn't have any of these other formats, it was a big deal. Even if it was a local level, it was a big deal. And so UIWA had a lot of steam. Now, okay, so we're in that era. You're obviously, man, you trained Supreme, you trained Joey Chaos. A lot of people don't know this, and thank you for sharing that here, because that's very interesting. But now we obviously know where Joey, Supreme, D, Pat, the direction they went, myself. Mm-hmm. And those of you that did not, you want to talk a little bit about that and how that rolled out, and how you found out, and how you were involved in the decision making and all that.
Well, the most thing that I remember is that we had the UIWA booked a pretty big show at the Ventura Theater that was going to have a lot of payoff matches and a bunch of, a couple of things here and there. Yeah. And then we find out, obviously, guys are no-showing, which at the time and probably now still has a little bit of bitterness. I just think it's kind of a bitch move that he didn't let them work out their dates. Mostly knowing that promotion was not going to be around for a long time. I always thought that was kind of a shit move. I was supposed to work Phil that night in a dog collar match, Phenomenal Phil, who ended up going there, who was smart enough to actually come and sit in the front row, which wasn't a good idea because the character at the time that I was playing didn't talk until I saw him.
Oh, shit.
And then I grabbed the mic and went to work on him and pretty much said horrible things to him. And I love Phil to death. And, and I'm sure he took it the way that he thought he was going to get talked to for showing up in the front row.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of a shitty thing that Rob didn't let him finish their dates out. It wouldn't have hurt them or the promotion at all. Right. It would have at least showed some respect to the guys who had them booked. It was that I felt that was kind of shitty. Yeah. On the other side, I did get a call. Kevin called me, like he called everyone that was going to be offered a deal. I went to the building that the ring was in. I was there during that whole meeting of people. Went, like anything, ran the ropes. I think bumped a couple times, did whatever. I probably worked with Lester or Joey because that was the easiest thing for me to do. Kevin calls me. Kevin knew. I mean, he knew the day he called me. Matter of fact, this is how I answered the phone. I was like, yeah. And he goes, Rob, it's Kevin. I go, hey, dude. He goes, I already know the answer, but I have to ask you. That's exactly how he started the conversation with me. He goes, I want to offer you a deal. We want you to work for us. And my answer was, can I work for anyone else? And they said no. And I said, nope, thanks a lot, but I'll pass.
Wow.
Because at the time, this is how I thought about it. Of course they sold XPW big, and they should have. They had a money mark, and like anyone, that's reality.
Yeah.
And I would have did the same thing. I should have milked them dry, but I also was looking to work.
Yeah.
And I also thought, look, you're only going to pay me $100 a match, maybe $100 a month, and I'm going to work once where I can work 5-6 dates, make more money, and work more. And I was still working. I could still go other places. Thankfully, based on the neighborhoods gimmick, they were still booking me here and there to still shows. So, look, man, hindsight is always 20/20. Do I wish I would have went? Yes, for different reasons.
Okay.
My friends went there. I think it would have been a lot of fun to see what I could have done based on how I know I could work. But knowing, the inside and outs of people who worked there, I wouldn't have been there long. I have a big mouth, and the first time someone said something, I would have spat it back, and then I would have ended up getting fired and let go anyway.
I could already imagine you and Webb having some interesting.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't have went well either. And I actually he's not a bad guy. He's actually a pretty cool guy.
You guys in some ways remind me of each other, and don't in some ways do.
That's probably why we wouldn't have got along.
Right,
we worked together. We worked together when we worked for the AWF for Red and Gary and all them and Simi. Again, good guy. Just you're right though, and I just think I would have me and D away from there. When I saw him at certain places, me and D had the same mentality. I'm an old school guy, and look, have I worked some crazy matches? Yeah, I worked some crazy matches for Freddie Valentine, and they were very controlled though, very controlled, more than you think, because Freddie Valentine was a Hollywood director, and when he had snakes in a cage, they were Hollywood snakes with a handler, and when he did a Japanese, match where shit exploded, he had a fire guy there from Hollywood and the fire marshal. It was very well controlled, and more controlled than you think. When you ran in the ring with an alligator, the last thing that they said to me was, just be careful of his tail. He might whip you. That was it. And I was like, okay, cool. But I ended up not getting around things, but things that I remember. I forgot who ran at the not the country club, at the same hall Freddie did later on. He ended up bringing New Jack in. I forgot what the guy's name was, but he brought in
It was Epic.
There you go. So that was, I think his name was right. Black Metal, right? I guess it ended up being Black Metal is the guy and New Jack. Okay. Well, I was offered that match. That guy called me and he goes, hey, we want you to work New Jack. I heard you work this style. And I was like, no, that's not me. And that guy goes, yeah. You worked this match with exploding barbed wire. I go, yeah, dude. I've worked it 2 or 3 times. That's not my style. I work Memphis style. And he was like, it got really quiet on the phone. He's like, oh, we wanted you to work New Jack. I'm like, nah, I'm good, dude. Thanks a lot. Well, that was the one where New Jack ends up tearing the guy's mask off and gigged him himself and beat the hell out of him. And, again, sometimes you say no for a good reason. And sometimes, you know what I mean? And But yeah, I mean, look, we all look back on things and look, the XPW did a lot of good for a lot of people. A lot of good. I mean, Lester and Joey went all over the place. Lester went to Japan and Mexico, and they did a lot of cool things. I think more in my head and my heart that I wish that, because a lot of friendships got torn, or because we all stopped talking to each other, because it was it almost felt like, you did move to the other company, and the other company was so off limits. Yeah. That we kind of stopped talking. And I didn't talk to Lester and Joey for years.
Yeah.
And not out of it just, they were doing their thing and they were busy.
Yeah, it was nothing personal, but it
No.
just evolved into that. I know
Yeah.
what you mean.
And then when we ended up seeing each other, it was great because it was like this like class reunion of like, the Yahoos from the North Hollywood ring. And thankfully, and I knock on a lot of wood, I got to go to Lester's, when they put him in the Hall of Fame, and I was there for that and got to see him. He passed away not too long after that.
I know, man. That was timing couldn't have been it was aligned for that to happen when it did.
Yeah. And it was cool. It was good to see him. And, then I got to see Joey, and Luke Hawx was there, and Messiah was there. And like, you end up running into these people where, like we were all grown up by then, like I was, we were older. So it was interesting. Like I did a lot of things. XPW kind of, I hate to say pissed me off, but it was like, look, they were the promotion in town. So I remember, I want to say when Messiah had the title, whoever ended up winning the title, I would take their finish and I would do the finish on UIWA or MPW shows, and I'd hit it like 3 times and I'd have every guy kick out of it. And then I'd pick him up and do my finish and pin him. And so I would do it all the time. And I ended up doing it with Billy at the show, but I guess he had just left and I didn't know. So I do it and I do it and I do it and I end up pinning him. And afterwards I see him in the crowd and I walk up, I'm like, hey dude, I'm really sorry about that. And he was super cool, but don't worry about it. That was kind of funny. and then I was like, and no joke, I asked him, I was like, so who's the champ now? He's like, Johnny Webb. I'm like, cool. What's his finish? No joke. I was like, what's his finish? Because I'm doing that one next. And I did.
That's great.
And again, it wasn't bitterness. It was out of fun. And then I ended up actually wrestling Billy not too long after that. So,
okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. It kind of goes to show you like these things where, things were meant to happen the way they did. And I just wish that our friendship would have stayed stronger. And it was more just as much my fault as it was anyone else's. I just kind of, and I ended up getting married and have a kid. And that's kind of where my relationship with Byron kind of got strained as well, because I think he kind of disappeared when he saw that I had a family. And again, I tried. And if anyone, if people don't know, Byron accidentally overdosed.
Yeah.
And we knew, I didn't know how bad, but I knew that he was using something. He had called me out of nowhere one time and he's like, hey dude, I want to start working again. I'm like, cool. I went and picked him up. We went to I don't even know who was running. I don't know. It was some battleground, somebody, one of the 700 promotions that were in California at the time. We go to the stuff, and unfortunately he was high. He ended up passing out in my car. I had to leave him in the car, go into the show, watch the show. And I ended up getting work from it. And, he was like, and I told him the whole ride home, like, dude, you got to get your shit together. And, and people tried. it was unfortunate. Really, but he wasn't the only one. You look at Louis. Louis Spicoli came to my house and passed out on my couch. So, and again, another good guy. He was such a cool dude. And it's unfortunate that, that we've lost these young men. They were young.
I don't know what it is with wrestling. We're all chasing this dream and this fantasy and this world of escape. That in large part, that's what wrestling is. And, you can either separate it or you can invest everything that you are and think that that's everything that you are due to wrestling is who you are. And when that goes away, you maybe want to fill that void. Because look, wrestling is great. It's fun. It's awesome, man. And it's fun to escape into that world. And you get excited to do that and to play that role of someone that you're completely not. That's a different person up there. Mm-hmm. And that's powerful. It's powerful for the wrestlers, for the announcers, for anybody involved. And I can completely see that in large part of the losses that wrestling has, and we've all felt it too, knowing these people. Part of the reason why wrestling has this attached to it is I feel it's not the whole enchilada, but in many ways it's because when that show is over and that void, filling that void is now done, it's a reality check to come back to real life. And what do people do after a show? Like, let's go out and party. Let's continue this. Let's celebrate what we just did. We don't want it to end, do we? No. I mean, that's kind of what we're all saying to each other on those nights. We're like, let's go out afterward. And in many ways, not everybody's saying that, but that's pumped into the water supply of pro wrestling, if you will. And I don't know. Wrestling. We have suffered a lot of losses, and there is a recurring theme with this, you know. And I really think it's that fantasy that it's just gotta be able to separate it and be okay with real life and be okay with the fantasy part, you know.
Yeah, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. I've never done any drugs, which most people find quite humorous, but the biggest adrenaline high I've ever had is walking through a curtain. There is no better rush than that.
Right.
And I don't miss bumping. I don't miss the pain. I don't miss, going to work the next day and my shoulder hurts, but I miss walking through a curtain and being able to make a crowd do something that I tell them to do. Yeah. There's nothing better than looking at a guy like you in the crowd who's giving me shit and opening the rope and doing nothing else, but the crowd roars based on what you're doing and I'm doing. You can't beat that, whether it's a work or if it's a real fan. You can't beat that rush. But unfortunately, you're right. Some people can't separate the two. Some people are 100% workers all the time, and they try to work everyone around them. And then there's the people who can separate the two people, the crazy guy who gets led on a chain, and then the guy who gets in the car that drives home to his house. Right. And sometimes you have to be able to separate that. And we all know people who can't. I can name a lot of names of people who can't separate the two things. But I know a lot of guys who are two totally different people. When they walk away from that ring, they're completely different human beings, which is even more odder thing.
Oh, I know. But that's in some ways that's the healthiest way is being able to separate it,
I think so. Yeah.
I mean it's an addiction, man. It's like it is a high. And it's something that, on one hand, you're proud of what you've accomplished. And sometimes that can kind of a little bit of that ego can kind of sprout from that.
Mm-hmm,
and get a little out of control and get a little fragile. And then the ego is just terrified of losing that.
Correct. I think, yeah. Look, you've been around people. It's obvious the way you speak. We've all been around people that, but I hate to say believe the gimmick, but some people believe the gimmick. And you're right. Once you believe that gimmick so much that you do become fragile. And when people start talking about losing, like doing a job, and they get very defensive about it.
Yeah.
It's like, I was taught by guys early, look, winning and losing is nonsense. It's total bullshit. Learn how to work, because if you're a good heel, you can lose every night and still be over. And so I've never really cared about jobbing. Jobbing's easy. I worked a show with MPW really late in my career. I was in my 40s. I get to the show. Dan Farron is running the dressing room. I'm getting dressed. And of course, Dan comes up to me and he's like, hey, we need to talk. And I was like, oh, whatever, dude. Like, what's up? He goes, well, we're going to put you with the hobo tonight, but we want to put him over. And I was like, okay, cool. And they got really quiet, like really fast. He's like, oh. I was like, what, you think I'm going to bitch about it? I go, don't worry about it, dude. I'll be over. And he's like, oh, okay. So I came up with a finish to protect me a little bit, but I did a clean job. We did Kurt Brown, who goes under a bazillion different gimmicks for I did the hold him, go up to Kurt. Kurt goes to with the brass knucks, moves, hits me 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
But I used to get in trouble at the Simi Valley Boys and Girls Club because I would go out and I'd put water in my mouth and I'd spit it into the crowd. Well, the people there got mad because these stupid kids in the front row would open their mouths and it would get all. So they tell me, Dan tells me at the curtain, do not spit water on anybody. Okay, no problem, dude. I walk out and there's this girl standing in the crowd, and she's probably, I don't know, 8, 9. I go and the girl's on a chain, and I stop and I put the water bottle in my mouth and I go to blow it and nothing comes out, and she starts laughing at me, and I have the bottle in my hand and I just go all over her, and it just drowned her in it. I go out and do my job, do this, and on the way back, she's waiting for me. And I get right over to her and she throws a cup of water on me and I no-sell it. It's just dripping off of me. And I grab the barrier and I go, and she starts backing up and I run and she's running and I'm trying to cut her off and I'm going to jump over the railing. And Kurt grabs me by the hair and he was doing like this holistic doctor nonsense. And he had a stone in his hand and he puts the stone in front of my eyes and he takes me to the back, calms me down. And I walk through the curtain and Dan Farron's there and I stop and I go, see, they didn't even remember me doing the job. And I walk right past him.
Oh, wow.
So I go, look, dude, it doesn't matter. Doing a job is nonsense. And again, I hope I don't come off like horrible about guys who bitch about doing jobs. I was taught differently. So I didn't care. Losing is losing. The
only prominent guy that I'd say did the opposite, and I don't know if you can think of who I'm saying, big star.
Oh, I know. I was in locker rooms that I heard people right behind me bitching about it. So
right, but the biggest name that I know of, and I've worked with him, was Roddy Piper, and he in the early days, he see, I agree with your school of thought right now, and then you it's like, well, I guess maybe there is no right or wrong answer. I guess it's all depends on the situation, but I think generally, a generalization of the sport of wrestling, entertainment of wrestling, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. What you're saying right now, in large part, is generally how it works.
Sure.
Where Roddy Piper, in the beginning of the whole rock and wrestling, and okay, if I'm just going to be the first job to Hogan and then done, and then like I'm going to end up like a year later, King Kong Bundy basically ended up. Once he jobbed, that was pretty much it.
Sure.
Different situation though, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think, look, Piper knew how to protect himself.
Yeah.
And I also think that the best thing I ever heard was Jerry Lawler and Eddie Gilbert. Eddie Gilbert was a major heel in Memphis.
Right.
Every Saturday, Eddie Gilbert would beat his ass on television, and then they'd run the circle and he'd do a job every night. And then he'd come to TV. He'd bitch to Jerry Lawler that he screw jobbed him in Knoxville. He'd beat his ass on TV. They'd go around the circle, and Eddie Gilbert would job on everything. Because if it's not on TV, it doesn't count.
Right.
So, and I think Piper probably did screw jobs or count outs on the house shows, but he did. He protected himself on TV.
Right.
But he probably went in and probably talked down McMahon and said, look, there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture. When I finally job, it'll mean something. It's kind of like Raven and Tommy Dreamer.
Yeah.
Raven dodged Tommy Dreamer for fucking 4 years.
Yeah.
And then when he finally got him, it meant something. The Piper thing in the 80s is a little different though. He protected himself probably, but he also protected himself with his mouth. His promos were so good that that guy could draw heat with, a rock and concrete and just rub it fast and it would burn. He was just that good.
He almost did more on the mic than he did in the ring.
Oh yeah. His in-ring work wasn't the greatest. But he knew how to draw heat. Mm-hmm. And he was methodical. He would, he did a lot of punches and a lot of kicks and a few body slams, but he worked the shit out of the crowd and he knew how to cheat and piss people off.
Right.
He was great. And he was a nice guy. Because were you at the show, the MPW show he worked?
I wasn't there. I was out of town, but I mean, Piper and I worked together on his last thing.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I got to know him very well, and dude, I've said this many times, one of the best, such a guy that never forgot where he came from, just like a normal guy. Like you would never think that he had this stardom or money or anything. Like you never would have thought that talking to him. He's just a guy from the streets, like he sounded like,
and very open to talking to the boys.
Yeah, totally.
Like
what the hell was. Yeah, he offered to say things that I wasn't, I was kind of like, I was talking to him, we were working together, but in moments it's like, let him talk if he wants type thing, and boom, he would just open up on his own,
But you could go to him, at least at that show, and I saw people asking about doing things in the ring, and he would go, oh, maybe you should do this, this, or this. Yes. He didn't say you have to. Right. It was, hey, maybe this is what I would do, or you can go do this, or you can go do that. And I think that, like, the several big names that I got to work or be around were all pretty much like that. Very down to earth, very nice. I never had a really bad experience with what you would call a star.
You're right.
So, I mean, I'm lucky because I've heard, some guys, like I worked shows with Honky, Coco, Bushwhackers. I worked Terry Funk. I worked with Abdullah, or I did a run in, like, but most of those guys, super cool, like more than you thought. Oh, Gangrel, he was also a super cool guy.
One of the best. Yeah.
One of the best dudes that he's so down to earth. And you'd never think that. Super cool guy.
Yeah. One of the nicest, easily. Yeah. I was going to ask you, we got past, when talking about Lester, Joey, and they, the fork in the road and all that. When you were coming up before you got into the business, or where you got, like, we talked about, obviously you've seen a lot of concerts and music. You seem like a guy that just found events when you were younger and went to them and found your way into them. Did that a lot with wrestling, like at the sports arena or?
My very first show that I ever went to, my dad took me and my best friend to, and I want to say, I can't even tell you the year, but you'd have to think of the year. It was after WrestleMania. They had just turned Orndorff babyface, and he was working Roddy Piper in the main.
So we're talking right after WrestleMania 1.
Yeah, so not too long. Probably about 6 months after that, they were starting.
At least at the most, or it would be probably less than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my very first show I ever went to.
Sports arena, LA
at the sports arena. Of course, my dad was the same way as most parents. He had to tell me it was fake from the get-go, and it was funny because my dad's from Knoxville, Tennessee, and my uncle worked in the arena in Knoxville during wrestling shows. So growing up, he would be like, your Uncle Lee would go to these shows, and all the guys talk to each other. And I got to the point where I was like, I don't care. Like, okay, it's not real. I don't care.
Isn't that great? Like where we are now, where our parents were then, like it just shows how different wrestling was. Like,
oh yeah,
imagine an adult telling a kid now, like we would never even have that conversation because everybody knows it now. Whereas then it just showed you the kayfabe, just the parent alone having like, look, I got to tell you something. I got the inside scoop. Like this is
it's not real, right? They're not. I
mean, just having that conversation alone shows you where we are in such a different place with pro wrestling and the kayfabe.
Yeah.
They knew it was fake, but just to have that revelation of a concept of a conversation is like, it just showed you like, wow, there's a little bit of believability here where we have to even start this a little bit of a debate about this.
Oh, for sure.
And how funny is that? Like wrestling, the parents have to tell you it's fake. If you don't believe in Santa, the parents, no, it's
right.
real. Like,
it's real. Yeah. And I think that it was more just like, because my dad would be like, this is silly shit. And I was like, yeah, I don't care. Like, yes. And so I finally conned him to get those tickets, and we went to that show. And then I think by then, I went to another show, and I think the main event for that was Beefcake and Macho Man in a cage. And those were the days that guys got color on house shows.
Oh yeah.
Like Piper got color.
It's almost foregone conclusion. I wonder which match is going to be the bloody one. Like,
someone juiced.
Yeah.
And then it took me a couple more years until I went, and then I ended up going when I want to say I was 18 or 19 to the first Flair Hogan match in LA.
Yeah, I couldn't go. It was my sister's birthday of the family deal. Like, oh man. And you know, it's funny, our friend Eric Malicki, and this is a trip.
Oh, yeah.
He couldn't go to that show either because it was his sister's birthday. Our sisters had the same birthday.
Oh.
We both were stuck with our families that night. Yeah.
It was funny too, because me and my friend, obviously watching the NWA, both of us went in suits. So we looked like the Horsemen, because we were big fans of.
That's awesome, man.
We were big fans of the NWA. So when we had gone, we were like, this is Flair from from the NWA. So it was kind of interesting, you know. That was a good time. And again, I think, oh shit, had they worked? I think they had worked at least one show before that, maybe two. So it was either, was it two? It wasn't their first one. They worked a night before that or two nights before that. It was like their third or second match.
Right. And they only did like maybe 3 or 4 like in the big cities.
Yeah.
They
I think that they really dropped the ball on that, because they shit canned it way too soon.
You know, I think that was late 91, and you know, house show attendance was dwindling, and you know, ratings period, but their house shows were really dwindling like within that year. So I think that's the only reason I think they did that, because they have saved that. I agree with you. WrestleMania, the next WrestleMania should have been like they did with Cena and The Rock. They hype it literally a year out, and boy, oh boy, man, that's I think we're not alone. I think a lot of people look back and say, what in the world happened there? Even when they first announced that it was going to be on the house show, we're like, wait a minute, what? Oh, that's cool, but what are they doing? Like, yeah.
And it was really cool because they ended up doing the Phantom change where Flair beat him.
Oh, right.
And I think, I want to say Valentine came out and they did the reversal, and then Hogan ended up beating him on the show. But they did the Phantom change and everything. And like, to hear that crowd pop for Flair winning the title was insane.
Yeah, I know, man.
For the time period. I mean, the biggest pop that I've ever heard, and I've been to a couple of WrestleManias, is still Austin to this day. There's no louder pop than I've ever heard. It was insane how loud it was.
Yeah, I remember that era when he or The Rock came out, and I remember going to a Raw in Anaheim, and I hadn't been in a couple years, but I was going like, you know, like you, like all the way back from the 80s and on. And I just remember, okay, well, we got tickets to WWF, and it was Raw, and boom, then the Attitude Era had started. I knew it was popping, but it wasn't until I got to that arena, it was like, holy, what the hell's going on here? And I remember I looked at my buddy, and we looked at each other like, holy shit, like this feels like 1987 all over again.
I think we were at a taping together as well, that we didn't know each other then. We were at the one out here in San Bernardino, or
that Marrow. So that was Mick Foley's first match. You could see it right there on TV, and then Mark Merrow's first match when he stole Sable from Hunter. There was a lot of firsts, and oh man, dude, I had Al Burke on the show, and we talked to him, and
I listened to that show.
And so dude, I know there's footage of that. It was the day after WrestleMania 12, the first Monday Night Raw, April 1st, at San Bernardino, where they had the first hour live, and then they taped 3 more consecutive hours.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was long. It's the Long Beach.
Oh my God.
Long Beach was like that too, with Superstar.
We were on the hard cam side. If you ever watch that show again, look up. So me and my friends were the guys that were yelling juice when the Warrior was in the ring.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you guys, I was opposite hard cam.
So we were the guys that were yelling juice, juice, juice. And if you ever see that promo, he turns around.
Oh, no way.
And then we were also the fans, and again, not to pat my back or anything, but when Vader got up, he was going to do the Vader bomb. We were the guys yelling moonsault, and he looked at us and did that was us. The 4 of us who were in the front row.
You guys were opposite hard cam. Because you guys were seen. Yeah.
We were seen right there. We were like right in that corner.
We were right there next to each other then. And then okay, so I know I saw the footage. I recently watched it on the network like a year ago, and we were looking. Okay, there I am, and then I think it was Danny Ramirez. I think he was at our friend Neil's place in downtown, and he's like, "Okay, Joey." Oh, was it Danny? I can't remember, but he said, "Yeah, you could see Lester and Joey over here on the right." So when you're looking at the TV on some angles, way to the right, you could totally make out Supreme. Joey looked like a kid.
Yeah, he was. He was a baby.
Yeah,
he was
you
16
couldn't
or
really
17.
recognize him, but Supreme, Lester, you could totally.
Yeah.
So they were over there too. I don't know if you guys knew.
That was us. Yeah, we were all right there.
Okay, you were sitting with them.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And it was great because, like, I remember Vader getting up to do the Vader bomb, and I think he was working one of the Polynesian dudes.
Oh, well, it was Yokozuna he was working. Yeah.
No,
That's
not Yoko. Haku, maybe?
Oh, no. Wait, I thought, yeah, didn't Vader destroy Yoko's leg, and that's when they took him out on the forklift?
Oh, maybe. Oh, that maybe, yeah, you're right.
But there again, they taped 4 episodes, so there could have
right.
been multiple Vader, yeah.
So when he was up there, we were yelling moonsault, and he kind of looks at us, because, you know, obviously, if you knew Vader before he came into the WWE, you know, he did a moonsault. So he all of a sudden, he's up there, and he's like, well, fuck it. And you can see it. Next time you watch it, look, he looks down and he tells him moonsault, and he fucking does it. And I was like, we go ballistic. We were like, yeah, it was, you know, it's great to be a mark. It is.
And we all are.
Yeah,
I mean,
all of us.
I remember there was a great story with in the back at the Grand Olympic. And, you know, we were all in the locker room, and a couple of the guys were talking about wrestling, and then I can't remember who it was for the life of me, but I just remember everyone was in there. Was kind of listening off to the side. And then they go like, no, you guys are marks. No, you're a freaking mark. You're a mark. And then Chris Candido stands up. He goes, dude, everybody, will you just shut the hell up? We're all fucking marks. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. Now just shut up and fucking go, you know. Yeah. And he just looked, and everyone's like, yeah, he's kind of right. Yeah, you know?
I mean, yeah, within reason. Look, I mean, like I like to tell people, like I hate the word smart, because there's no such thing as a smart mark.
Please elaborate on this. I remember you talking about this, and it's very interesting. And
you're either smart or you're a mark, and it's okay to be a mark, but you're either a worker or you're not. Like, look, anyone can understand the business, but if you've never taken a bump or a backdrop, you're still a mark. And I know people hate to hear that, but that's the truth. It's no different than I'm a mark for football. I've never been in pads and I've never been hit. So I can't armchair quarterback and say, oh, I'm better than that guy because I've never done it.
Right.
So to me, you know, there's no smart fan. You're either a fan or you're in that business. Yes. And that's okay. So like that's why when people say smarks, I just giggle. There's no such thing. You're smart to the business or you're a mark, and it's okay to be both.
I mean, if you're going by that, then okay, so remember we were talking about how our dads in the 80s were like, hey, guess what? I got the inside scoop. So compared to dads in the 50s, those 80s dads were smart marks.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Totally. And kind of horrible ones trying to smart you up to the business the wrong way.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
like a lot of people that haven't been around it, and especially, like you said, in the ring, they really believe that, yep, I get all of it. I know exactly how all of this works, you know, like, and you're never going to understand that. And even my position, I'm not a wrestler. I've been around it. Well, I did do the bumps with D and Damian Steele.
but you've been around enough guys talking about how the formatting a match to be able to call it, that you're there, dude. It's no different than a referee who's never worked.
No, I understand. Yeah, I appreciate it. But what I mean is, like, that's for whatever reason, that's the goal of the fan today, is to, like, okay, I watched that match, get on my phone, gonna find out what they're saying back there. Okay, you know, the only world that still doesn't do that to this day, we talked about it earlier in the episode, is still Lucha. They don't care. They don't want to know what's going on in the back. They don't even care. They know what this is, yet they want to preserve it and honor it. And that's the only world of professional wrestling that is the closest thing that still exists to that old school, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. We all know magic is not real. You know, you don't go to see an illusionist and halfway through start going, well, you know, this isn't real. It's like, well, of course it's not real. I mean, how many women have you seen get sawed in half and they're still alive?
Right.
None of them. The whole point is, or I heard one of the greatest things ever, and it was from two different people. It was Jerry Lawler in an interview that was in, I want to say one of the newspapers locally about a WrestleMania coming here. And they kind of went over it being not real. And he goes, you don't go to watch Jurassic Park and halfway through Spielberg jumps out and goes, just so you know, the dinosaurs aren't fucking real.
Right.
Because you already know they're not real. You're going there for 2 hours to escape reality. And that's what wrestling is. And the second one is from Jesse Ventura. And he goes, look, wrestling is real. And someone was like, well, it's not. And he goes, look, is ballet real? He goes, it's just ballet with violence.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know that the dancers all know the dance and they've practiced it a million times, but you still go to watch them dance. That's what wrestling is. You know that the guy's not beating his head in, but you still want to get away from reality and believe that your favorite guy is beating up the other guy because he's an asshole. And I think we're going away from that a little bit in modern wrestling. At least to me, I really don't watch a lot of shows now. And I know people who work on them, which is even kind of in a weirder way, but you know, they got away from heels and baby faces.
Yeah.
And I think that that's going to kill the business
eventually. Yeah.
Eventually, because look, anyone can like a spot monkey. And for people who listen to watch your show, they know what I'm talking about. I was always told this, like, you can put a whole chain of moves together, but which one are they going to remember? They're going to remember the last one. You can do 25 spots in a row. They're going to remember the last one you do. So why don't you just build for one big move, one big high spot, or two or three? Like, I get it. And it is a faster pace. And I understand that as well. And I hate to sound like the bitter old vet, but at the end of the day, you know, you can still go out and work and have people care about the characters. But I just think that they've gone away from it because the All Japan and New Japan styles are what they think people want. And it's exciting. Don't get me wrong. But for me, you know.
But is it sustainable? It's kind of like watching a classic film, beginning, middle, and end, or just watching a ton of Michael Bay movies over and over.
Yeah, sooner or later, everyone's seen the Michael Bay movie.
Yep.
Not everyone knows how to work a classic noir movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
any film student can put together a Michael Bay type of film, but you know, are you gonna put a classic together? Like it's and wrestling has that formula, and yeah, it's funny. It's well, lucha is a lot of spot. But what I was referring to was just the perception of the audience, more or less.
Sure. No, but they still care about the technical and the rudo.
Yes,
like it means something. Like they understand that the technical does not do bad things.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have to. He's better than that. And the rudo is the guy who's almost as good, but as soon as it gets to that time where the technico's better, you've got to put a thumb in his eye. So and it still works today. Like you can do it.
Yeah, and it's not like, and then some people will argue, well, those people think it's real. No, they don't. They don't. They don't. And they are having fun with it. Of course they don't. You know what I mean? But they're allowing themselves to get caught up in the show, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, we can go back to using you as the example, being at a show that I was working. Whether you knew it was real or not didn't matter to you.
No.
You knew that I was the bad guy, and your job as a fan was to shit on me.
Yeah, that's it.
That was it. So you were still being entertained, even though you knew it wasn't real, because you were entertaining me, and I was being able to be the heel.
Yeah.
And I think more people need to try to at least go back to that. You can do your 40 spots in a match, but you still have to have something that draws you into each person. And look, as a society, we like heroes. Look at Avengers movies. They make $1 billion every time one comes out. So we still want good guys and bad guys because the world is full of both.
Yeah.
And we always want the good guy to win.
Right.
So I just think that you're right. It's not sustainable. And I mean, I think, at least in my own opinion, the thing that kind of ruined pro wrestling to me are writers. You know, before when it was a booking committee and it was bookers and guys who understood how to book shows to draw money. Now these guys have no personality. They're all coming out of one school. If we're talking about the WWE, where they're training everyone the same way. So they're cookie cutters. The 80s were great because everyone came from the territories.
Yeah.
So, you know, when Jake Roberts came, he'd been working in Georgia and he worked a Georgia style. And they brought him into the WWF. And then all of a sudden he transformed that Georgia style, working the New York style, but still knowing how to work a crowd Georgia style.
Totally.
And that's missing today. That, you know, you ask wrestlers, big time wrestlers that are on circuits that go across the country, different arenas are different. And you have to work crowds differently in different arenas. When you go to the South, it's a night off. It's a night off, dude. You don't have to do much.
I know.
You need to be a heel.
I went to shows in Memphis and did some shows down there in Georgia. And oh my gosh, it was just time capsule one, but just, so great, man. Just so great for what you're saying. And, you know, when the writers, another example was what you said earlier too, the Vader moonsault. Yeah. Like today, if that writer wrote exactly what he has to do, he's not going to listen to the fans to do something like that. Mm-hmm. That purity, that innocence, and that kind of like, it was still there to where it wasn't so controlled and contrived yet. You know?
It gave him an option to change the story without changing the story.
Yes, right. Common sense was still allowed to be executed and used by the performer. And now it's like performers are discouraged to use common sense, almost afraid of their own common sense because they're conditioned that way now, to the point where you're right, it's cookie cutter, almost very robotic.
For sure. Yeah. And you can, I mean, unfortunately, you can kind of say a lot of the same thing about the indies, right? So I mean, I haven't been in a locker room in 7 years. So I had to put my before I put my foot in my mouth, I have to kind of say that I haven't been around. But even when near the end of my run, you know, guys put whole matches together, start to finish. And it leaves no imagination. So when I broke in, it was like an opening spot, you know, a couple of turnarounds, a false comeback, take it home, and then call the rest in the ring. So like now, if a guy has a guy in a chin lock and the crowd is chanting for him, they don't have a comeback. They don't have a false comeback.
Right.
Because they've already planned the whole fucking match out to the end. So they can't give the crowd a comeback. So when I was in it, dude, I would be like, cool, elbow, duck, crossbody. I'll kick out, cut you off. And I could say that quickly. So babyface would give me 2 elbows. He'd hit the ropes, duck, crossbody me, 1, 2, kick out, cut his ass off. Because the crowd was chanting for him, I give him a little bit and sweep their legs out from under him. Right. Now guys can't do that because they have the whole match planned out. And that's what's missing from wrestling as well. Like I worked a show with Primetime Peterson, which is a guy from way back in the back when I first broke in. Mm-hmm. We ended up getting thrown in a match together. And at the time, like we didn't have a lot of time to put a match together. He literally said, here's the opening spot. Here's the finish. I'll call the rest. And he did. And he had been in the business a lot longer than me. And it was just listening and executing. So, and it was terrifying. I mean, I was not green, but I hadn't been in the business a long time. Right. So here I am, like ears open, just everything that he said, I did. And he called my comeback, everything. Called all my babyface stuff. He called everything. So there's something about, like you said, the innocence of being able to work a crowd just by hearing them say something, or you do a big move and they pop. You're like, okay, let's give them something similar to this. So, me, Byron, Lester, and Joey worked a match at Moguls. Like I said, we were doing dives into the crowd, all this crazy shit. And Chris Jericho happened to be at this show because WCW was in town. So that'll tell you whatever year it was. I think they were working the Forum. Anyway, I don't know how he found out about this, but he's at this little bar in Hollywood. Me, Lester, and Joey, I mean, we did everything. Dives over the top, fucking whatever we could do, we did. We get to the back, we're exhausted, and Chris Jericho comes back to the dressing room, and he's like, "Hey guys, great match, good job." He goes, "Just a word, a word I got to get in." He goes, "If they're popping for an arm drag, give them another one." He goes, "Why are you doing all this dives into the fucking crowd when they're popping for this little shit?" He goes, "You're killing yourself for nothing." And I was like, oh shit. So I took those words of wisdom throughout the rest of my career, that you don't have to kill yourself to get a pop. You have to understand how to work.
That's right.
And it's, it got me 20 years. So I must have been doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And gosh, dude, I think this is going to be very informative to a lot of young people watching, and also just the people that know about the history of or are interested in the history of this part of the country, because there's so much history in California for pro wrestling, even after Vince's takeover or whatever you want to call it. There's still been a lot out here, and of course before that. And no, man, I want to thank you for geez, dude. I mean, I could honestly, dude, we could be on here for 2 more hours.
Oh yeah, for sure. We can do a second one later on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, man, I don't want to keep you, and we're just about to wrap up here, but is there, and yeah, I was gonna say, like, we'd love to have you on for another edition down the road, part 2, but no, thank you, Crayz, for being our guest here tonight, man. It's great stories, man, great insight, great stories, and I knew it was gonna be that with you on this.
We know so many people together, and like the SoCal wrestling scene in the 90s was an interesting time. It really was. And a lot of people bloomed out of this place. Like Samoa, like I could have went into I saw Samoa Joe take his first bump in Orange County, like before he was anything. And we didn't even talk about Cincinnati Red. And there's so many other stories of a lot of good guys. Like I wrestled the Young Bucks with Extreme Loco in Newhall. Like there's things like that when people, I have friends of mine that are like, "Oh, have you seen these guys, the Young Bucks?" I'm like, "Yeah, I wrestled him. Hold on. I'll bring up the YouTube and I'll show them." And they're like, "Oh shit." And I go, "Yeah, dude. Like I know these people."
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time, man. A lot of good people came out of that, even though, I had my issues with the XPW thing. It definitely was a great time for wrestling here. So regardless if you liked it or not, it made a statement of this part of the country. So
completely. And no, man, it wasn't even that long of a period, but we all look back and talk about it because so much happened in that relatively short amount of time in the grand scheme of things. But
for sure.
Yeah, man. Hey, is there anything you want to say to the fans, or any shout outs or any plugs, anything at all?
Well, I do what you do now. I'm a podcaster. So
good.
I have a podcast called Don't Get This Twisted. It's on Apple and Spotify and all that good stuff. I'll send you the links. As for the fans, it's like, look, man, I probably need to start going to shows now. I tried to stay away from them for a long time when I decided to get out. I was lucky, dude. I wrestled Jason Redondo in my first match, and I wrestled him in my last match.
Wow.
Which is a very hard thing to do in this business, where I got to bookend the same guy.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. He was nice enough to come up.
Cali's finest too.
Yeah, great guy, and a consummate professional.
Oh yeah.
I love the business. The business is great. I think that sometimes you need to go backwards to move forward. And I think that the newer generation really needs to study the middle times of this, like the Attitude Era and before, and understand that you can work in old school styles with the newer age stuff and make it work.
It's like a movie maker that goes back to, like, let's say going back to film noir or whatever that really worked, and then sprinkle a little bit of that into what our society is today. You know,
it can be done. It's it's a great storytelling device, and thankfully I got to do it for a long time. I've met a lot of good guys. I mean, a lot of good people that all of us have. And it's funny how, we know so many people, me and you together, from working all these different promotions, and we really didn't meet until way later.
Yeah. Really get to know each other till a little later. Yeah.
So
W days, which we didn't talk about either, where the young guys were involved and all that. But
so it's interesting, man. But that's it.
How do we find your podcast?
It's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google.
And what's it called?
Don't Get This Twisted. Basically, it's an opinion show. Me and an old high school friend come up with topics and give our opinions on them, and try to raise hell. We have interviews with people on there. It's just a fun show to let me vent, because I have a big mouth and like to talk.
Yeah, man, you're a good venter, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to be on again, man, for sure.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and dude, it just tripped down memory lane, and just good, insightful, very good, insightful interview as always. Rob, Crayz, thank you very much. Good seeing you again, my friend, and hope that what you say is true, and hope that we will see each other in a locker room or whatever somewhere.
For sure. I'd like to maybe we should get together. I have a traveling little podcast device. Maybe you, me, Eric, and we'll get another worker, and we'll sit down and have kind of a round table podcast.
Yeah, and shout out to Paul Logan, MPW, 19801 Nordoff Place, every Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Millennium Pro Wrestling. Maybe one Friday, if you're in the area, you can.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, see some of the young guys.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Crayz. Good seeing you, brother.
No problem, brother. Anytime.
And thank you, fans. New episodes of Cali's Finest dropping on the 10th of every single month right here when you subscribe to the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. We will see you next time. Thank you.